It's good to mute yourselves unless you need to talk so that there isn't feedback. Sheridan, I'm not seeing how to, Margaret somehow moved around, unmute. I can't unmute you now. Okay. Hi, Sheridan.
Hi.
Margaret, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I muted myself at your suggestion.
Got it. I just, it's funny, you don't see the difference whether you mute you or I've made you mute.
Okay.
As the host, so.
All right.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
Sorry about Griff.
Okay, why don't you turn on your mute, Sheridan, so that I don't hear that. Thank you. Okay. Are we expecting Cliff?
I haven't heard.
I spoke with Cliff earlier today and he said he was planning to be there.
That was my expectation, yeah.
I got a text from him too. I thought, yeah. But we didn't confirm time. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Harris, will you let me know before you begin the meeting so I can start the manual recorder?
Yeah, I just wanted, and we are recording this whole session through Zoom's function.
Right,
too.
this is a backup, yeah.
So I'm trying to work on the broadcast, but I'm having issues. So if you guys want to proceed with the meeting whenever you're ready, I'll just get it loaded when I can. And we can play back the meeting and post it on the website if that doesn't apply.
Do you want me to try to do that?
No, it's way more complicated than me just telling you how to do it.
No, well, I would just do
There's
it
a lot of
tonight.
integration and passwords and really long links.
Okay.
So.
I'm hearing from Cliff that he is having a hard time getting in. I had a dialogue that I was waiting to be let into the meeting. Let me invite him.
That happened to me too. It took a long time.
Hi, Mike Murray.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hi, Lise.
Hi.
Hey, Polly. Hey, Mike.
Hi.
Chris Cawley, admit him. Okay, Chris, you should be here. Hi, Chris. Okay, I still don't see Cliff. You don't see him in the list there, Jen, do you?
Let me look.
Hey, Margaret.
I do not. I will, I'll text him to just.
I've been texting him.
Oh, okay.
I sent him another invitation from the invite link down at the bottom of the page here. Well, I don't know how to fix Cliff's problem. Launching,
Maybe
nothing
he
happening.
could call in. could he at least initially audio in?
I'll ask him. The invitation that gets launched gives you a phone number, doesn't it?
Yep.
I'm suggesting that he calls in and then restarts his computer.
Anyone have any good jokes?
Clean ones?
We are recording.
Shoot.
Yeah, maybe even broadcasting.
We're getting close.
So Polly, you're pretty backlit. Is there a way to turn on a desk lamp or anything?
I was thinking, yeah, maybe I'll try that. Let's see. I'll move. There we go.
Yeah, that's better. Thanks. And Margaret, you've got a reflection.
Where'd you find all those
Oh,
wildflowers,
what
Sarah?
is that?
It's my holder so that the iPad doesn't fall off the desk.
Oh. Oh, this is just you can put photographs onto Zoom and then use them as backgrounds.
Cool.
I figured that was more interesting than my wall. All right, Cliff, what's happening? Did the rest of you, were any of you prompted for a password?
Yes.
Not if I use the link that was in the email directly. I think if you go through the Zoom, then it'll ask you for meeting ID and password.
Right, same
Cliff.
here. No password on the computer, but
All right.
it asked for a password on the phone.
There is a number in the Zoom invitation, correct? A phone number?
Correct.
You want me to just text Cliff the number from the invitation?
Sure.
He probably has his email open.
I'm not looking at the invitation. I don't know if that, so I have noticed that things kind of expire after a little while, but we're in the same meeting as that invitation. So it might, go ahead and text it to him, Chris, but he's got an Android phone, so you can't do it from your laptop. At least I can't from my Mac. I can send him a picture.
Hey, Elise, can you hear me?
Yeah. I can't see you anymore.
Any chance you can make a budget committee meeting this Friday or Thursday?
Tomorrow, Thursday?
Yeah.
What time were you thinking?
You tell me a time you're available and we'll try to work around that.
Probably something in the afternoon, like after 2 to 4, or 2 to 5.
Oh, I hope it's not that long, but
No, just starting anywhere in that time.
okay. All right.
2
Everybody.
o'clock's fine. Hey, Cliff.
Cliff, did we get you?
Cliff is here.
Great.
Okay. All right. I'm going to call the work session, the remote work session for Alta's Town Council to order. Piper, are we ready to get started?
Yes, we are.
Okay, it's Wednesday, April 8th. We have 2 items on our agenda: discussion regarding the UFA/UFSA and the extension of the emergency proclamation number 1, which is the root, so to speak, of the other proclamations. Okay, I think that I've tried to share all the information I have about the UFA/UFSA issue, and what I'm hoping we will do is have a motion before this body when we call the regular meeting to order, and we'll be able to vote on the resolution that has been drafted. But what I'd like to be able to do is host any conversation you want to have about that for the next, well, it's 4:15 now until about 4:40, about 4:40, 4:45, another 5 minutes, I guess. I'm happy to answer any questions or try to deal with any objections to the proposal that I think we ought to pursue.
I have a comment and I guess a series of kind of questions about it. And I appreciate all the work that you've done so far in getting us information about UFA and UFSA and the work that you've done for the last 3+ months. And you may have answers to some of these questions, but I haven't had a chance to find out if you do or not. So I'd like to read this statement and then you can comment or others can chime in as well afterwards. As I looked at the total assessed value of property in Alta, we're about $315 million, and that's based upon the revenue divided by the certified tax rate. And then the owners of that property collectively paid last year about $37 million in property tax. And as we know, nearly half of that went to the schools. About 1% of our property tax supports our town government, and that provides approximately 1/4 of the town's total revenue. Out of that total revenue, the town is currently funding our fire protection and emergency medical services, as you've said, at $152,000 a year. And that pays for 2 things, the fire protection as well as the EMS, the emergency medical, for acute injuries and illnesses. And that data comes from the material that Jay Torgerson provided to me, and that was individually forwarded to all the council members at our March meeting. And I'd like those documents to be added to our town council file, either at the March meeting or as part of this meeting. There were 2 documents. And then it's clear that of that portion of $315 million in property and EMS care, that who's consuming each of those. We know that over the last 5 years, there have been 7 fires in Alta. And in addition to that, there have been 255 calls for EMS services. And nearly all of those have been visitors to the resort area and not property taxpayers. The community is now being asked, as you've laid out for us, to pay for the fire and EMS, and an increase of about a factor of 5, from 152,000 to the new numbers that you just got from Chief Peterson for $739,000. And even though the annual average number of calls per month has only doubled between 2015 and 2019. So the average increases seem like they mask the real story, which is the increase of call volume is in the winter, and it's driven by the visitors, not by the resident property owners. And so in a fair and equitable world, the consumers of the services would pay, would be the ones to pay for the service that they're using. And there is no social justice for the property owners to be subsidizing the lift served paying skiers. So why aren't the primary consumers of emergency medical paying for it? And I think the answer is fairly obvious. We don't have a current mechanism to have them pay for it. And so could we invent one? Could we imagine, for example, a ticket tax of about $1 a day, or a ticket insurance that would be for EMS protection? And there are many situations where one purchases insurance, like when you rent a car and other circumstances where you pay for that protection. So a modest tax of $1 per skier per day would cover about 60% of the costs of the fire and emergency medical of the town. And more importantly, it would apply to the cost of the service for the community that uses it, for the visitors to the resort, whether they're actually residents or coming from somewhere else. And while none of us are saying, no, we don't need fire or emergency medical services, it's pretty clear that we do want it, we do need it, and we get an excellent service. But is it appropriate for that cost to fall entirely on the portion of the population that uses so little of it, the residents? We know that the property values in town are about split equally between the commercial properties and the residential properties. So for the residential properties to be paying this cost just doesn't seem like a social justice issue that we should continue with. So I would like to discuss, could we extend the time period for evaluating UFSA? If they're willing to allow us to come in at the tax levy where we would only pay 533, somebody's making up that difference of the 200K between the 533 and the 739. That would be our share of the station. And so there seems to be some question on my part. Are these numbers really as solid as they are? Why are we using a call volume in one circumstance and another circumstance completely unrelated to call volume and is just based upon a property tax rate? So that's my statement. There were other questions that I think came up and maybe are going to be part of the town council meeting, because I received an email from a property owner here, and he said he had sent the questions on to Piper. So whether that's something that just gets read later, I don't know procedurally how to handle that.
Margaret, I did get something from a resident yesterday before the deadline, and then I received what you forwarded me today after the deadline. I also today got another thing after the deadline. So I'm not sure what should be read in the citizen input, but I do have 2 comments to read that of things that came in before the deadline.
Okay.
During citizen input.
Harris, you're muted.
Right. I think it's good practice to mute yourself if you're not talking, because there's background noise from various things. But then you have to remember to unmute yourself. So thank you, Margaret. when it looks like you're about to talk, I think your box, at least for me, lights up. So it looked like Cliff, your Hollywood Square box lit up. So if you, I'm not sure, Margaret, if I don't know exactly what it is that you'd like me to respond to in what you said. If anything, or if anybody else wants to respond to what Margaret said.
Well, I mean, one question you may have an answer to is why with UFA it's based upon call volume, where our rate would be 739. And if we went with UFSA, it's not on call volume. It's based on property tax, where we would pay only 533 towards the cost of that station. As I understand it, the station is going to provide the same service, the same people, the same engines. So who's making up the difference in the cost of that station if the town is not paying for it under contract?
Yeah, I can address that. So the UFA offers two options for membership. One is to join the UFSA, and the other is as a direct contracting municipality. I'm going to tell you the answers I received about how those costs are allocated in both cases, and I'll tell you why they are offered, why the municipalities are offered that choice, because I have asked that question and received an answer to that. Under the UFSA, which is a taxing district, as Margaret said, and as you all know, there is a quasi-socialist model, which is to say that the costs are shared through the whole district. What the board of the UFSA would make decisions about, for example, if the costs of a station were too high to carry that, well, as the costs go up, they have to raise their tax revenues, and they do that through the tax rate. The other way they increase revenues is that the tax rate can go up and the assessments can go up, and both of those would lead to higher revenues. So what would happen in, for example, I'll take the Brighton station because it's heavily subsidized by the recreation area to the tune of $1.7 million. If the county were not going to do that, then the board of the UFSA would have to decide, do we think that that's where we want to put our money? Because Brighton's contribution would remain, because they're in UFSA, as Margaret was suggesting, would remain at the taxable rate, which is $770,000, I think it is. So the board is making the decision how much of a difference there is between how much difference is acceptable to socialize between the cost of providing the service and the actual revenues that they're collecting across their entire taxing district. Some municipalities, ours is the example, the direct contract rate would be higher than the UFSA rate. There are two municipalities that are, besides us, who are contract members. It's Holiday and Cottonwood Heights. In their cases, the contract rate is lower than it would be, than their costs would be if they went with the tax authority. And when I asked why are they given that choice, the answer was they would leave the UFA and have their own fire departments if we didn't give them that choice, because the tax rate would be so high as to push them out of the UFA. So I think the idea is the UFSA/UFA socializes the costs and benefits of the system. There are economies of scale that make that possible by having a large system. It increases effectiveness because they can have dozens of fire engines this way. But they offer the opportunity to be a direct contractor, and then they charge you your cost.
Was there an opportunity, Harris, to extend or give us additional time because of this, either way, huge increase or change to the cost for the town, whether it's out of the town budget or part of the town budget? Was there an opportunity to extend that time period further in light of the fact that we've got not only a short time period to get it all worked together with Piper suggesting potentially a budget meeting this week, and with the difficulties presented as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, that things are just slower than normal. The public hearing, getting the taxpayers on board with this. Was there a possibility of getting a 4-person crew as a way of justifying it to property taxpayers that, this huge increase of 15.5% of their costs or more, 15.5% of their property tax is going up 15.5%. Was there a way of phasing that in? Was there any other discussion that you had? Because it seemed like when Elise and Cliff met, there was a possibility of extending that months, if not, I think Cliff's idea was longer than that. And then in your further discussions following the COVID crisis, whether that would be extended to us as well.
Okay, you just asked a bunch of questions. If I didn't get them all down, you'll just remind me. The answer on the timing is in part constrained, as I understand it. Polly, if you know something different than this, you can let me know. But is that there are statutory requirements of when budgets are filed. I got an email yesterday from I don't remember if it was I'd have to look. I don't remember if it was the county or the state. There is some talk about whether or not Governor Herbert will, through executive order, extend the budget deadline requirement from, for example, June, right? Like we have to do. That has not happened yet, as far as I am aware. And so the UFA is dealing with a budget cycle just the same as ours. So they cannot unilaterally change that budget cycle. Whether or not they would extend our present arrangement, our status quo arrangement, and not charge us. The issue is if we're paying 153 and they think that we owe them 740, somebody has to pay that difference. And I don't know that they think that we've had, I became aware of the details of this. Well, not the details. I became aware that I needed to learn the details in November. Through December is when I continue to learn details, but had a pretty good understanding and shared it with you in December in the memo I wrote you at the end of that month. So January, February, March, April, May, 4 or 5 months. I don't know that they're going to think that this has been a short time if we do not look like we're going to join the EU. On the other hand, my belief is, and I can't make a commitment to this because it would require the action of the entire UFSA board. They meet on the 21st, and I would intend to attend that meeting. But I believe that they will grant us some period of time if we vote to join the UFSA. I think we will get a grace period. It won't be multiple years, but it will be worth some substantial amount of money to our taxpayers. But I don't have details of that until I actually talk to them and make a request. The other thing you asked about was a 4-person crew. I've discussed that several times now. Most recently, these days go by. I think it might have been yesterday, but it might have been Monday with Chief Peterson. The additional 4th member of the crew the cost is about the marginal cost is about $400,000 is my understanding. I said 500 the other day, but I think I must have misremembered one of the earlier conversations, because just this week he said 400. So if we're a contract member, that 400 would be added to the cost of the station, and presumably we would pay 33% of the 400,000 on top of the amount that we're going to be billed anyway. If we are a member of the UFSA board weighs in on that question, and it's a question of resource allocation and cost. As you pointed out, it would increase the difference between the tax bill paid by Alta and the cost of Alta would go up substantially. So I don't know if they would agree to socialize that cost. In addition, there are resource allocation problems because right now the UFA is understaffed, and they're paying a lot more money than they budgeted for overtime, because they don't have quite enough people to staff all of the equipment as it is. So until they solve that personnel problem, I don't know if they would be willing to dedicate a fourth person. Generally, my understanding is that the UFSA board makes a determination about need when they are doing that. And I think that it would not be very persuasive to argue that they needed it in the summer. If we were to join the UFSA, I would become a board member of the UFSA, and I would make the request that we have a four-member crew, and I would certainly ask them to consider data that would make the argument that a four-member crew during the ski season is a good idea. But I don't know that that's necessary. I think the way they make this decision is by asking the question at the first, besides resource allocation from some other places, the question they will ask is, how often is a crew occupied when there is an incoming call? Because that's when a four-member crew would really make a difference. Chief Peterson said to me, what's more important, given the usage patterns at Station 113 than a four-member crew, is having an ambulance in that station, and they did make that allocation. We'd have to ask Jay when they did that, but it was within some recent time.
I feel like this is a conversation between the two of us, Harris, sorry, but when I got an email from Dr. Ken about their calls to kind of compare that with what I got from Jay and shared with all of you individually, he said for the 18-19 ski season that they actually use 3 different stations, both 113, Snowbird, our typical one, as well as 116 and 110, which I think are the ones that are Cottonwood Heights and Holiday, the shared ones, for 45 calls. So that kind of suggests that 113 is busy, and that they've had to draw on units from those other stations in order to meet the EMS and maybe just the transport, I'm not sure which, but in order to meet those needs.
Yeah, so the issue would be they're not going to put 2 ambulances in that station. So if an ambulance is already transporting someone to a hospital, say, what they would be able to dispatch is a fire engine with a 4-member crew. They'd have, presumably, I'm not sure what the operational requirements are to send out a unit. I don't know if fire engines can be sent with 2 people or not, actually. So some of that demand for coverage from the other stations may be our firefighters are busy helping people on site, and some of that may be our firefighters, because the model at the UFA is all the ambulance drivers are also firefighters, are transporting somebody. And so regardless of how big our crew was, unless we had another ambulance, you would need to bring another unit in from someplace else. I don't know. That's a pretty detailed question that I haven't asked. I only got as far as saying, would we be able to discuss usage patterns and need? And the answer was, well, sure, we can discuss that now and you can pay for it, or we can discuss that if and when you join the UFSA, and then you can do that as a board member.
I guess I'm astonished that our history with Bill helping to create the UFA, with our paying for slightly more than 0.75% of a firefighter, with the UFAs raising rates back in 2018, I believe, with a verbal promise or an email promise that they weren't going to go beyond that. I just am astonished that a multiple of 5 with the bill that they're presenting us is something that they think is reasonable or something we can really work with, even in a 6-month period.
I'm not sure what the implication of that is, Sheridan, but I have pointed out that we don't have an extra $700,000 lying around.
And their response was tough.
No, the response is pay for fire protection the way that other communities do, which is to put it on the property taxpayers in the property tax. Join the tax district has been the response from the entity that was making up the difference. Certainly, that is to say, the county. And my guess is that would be the response from the current members, given the difference between 153 and 739. I
It
do
just
know.
feels sorry.
Go ahead.
I apologize. It just feels that it's a framing issue that has radically gone from what was the creation of something that for many years kept us hovering around $100,000 or $150,000 as a cost that seemed fair to all the members at the time, and now is being presented as we've been getting a great deal. We're sort of scofflaws as a town. We've been being subsidized by others, yet that seems to want to ignore all the long history of what led to the creation of the UFA, our participation in the creation of Station 113. And I guess throwing out all that history doesn't seem very valid to me in the way that the county seems to want to ignore many ways that Alta as a town and community brings great economic might to the greater Salt Lake County area.
I'm not sure quite how to respond to that. I don't think anybody's calling us scofflaws or saying we did anything wrong. I think that they're just saying that the county is saying we're not going to pay for that anymore. So the UFA members are acknowledging that this money isn't accountable to can't be applied to our invoice. And I don't think the UFA likes that necessarily. They would just as soon be able to do that. But the county has said that they won't allow it. So I think that that's the big change.
Any thoughts about the ticket tax or some sort of insurance cost to be passed to the users of essentially the EMS service?
My thought is that we are quite close to it. I had believed up until Polly looked into this for me that we had maxed out all of our possible sales tax revenue, our sales tax charging, except for a transient room tax, which would be available. However, in investigating it, Polly has discovered that indeed we could raise our property tax by 0.1% more than we are currently charging.
Actually not, that's sales tax. It's a additional resort tax, so
I
it's
beg
not
your
property
pardon.
tax.
I misspoke. Thank you. I meant to say sales tax. And I think a $1 charge added to every lift ticket. I appreciate that you're calling it an insurance cost. Until you said that today, when I heard about this idea for the first time in something from you, I think, it looked like a sales tax to me.
Right, we can't impose any type of additional tax, of course. Could there be a fee? I don't know how we would segregate a fee for just one user, but it's something I could look into. I know that, fees, from what I've understood is that when municipalities try to impose a fee in lieu of a tax, the legislature steps in and stops that from happening. But it's definitely something I can look into some more. I think it's a bit of a long shot, and we would have to really think about, how that would be. I don't think you can just say one user, because even though, most of the people who have that need are coming from one particular source, there are some people who maybe are staying in a lodge that maybe need EMS services, or residents who may need an EMS service. And then there are the fires, right? So we'd have to look into how you can't just charge one group and not others. So that would
Well, the idea of singling out Alta ski area and taxing their sales, that's not one that I could join in. And I think the idea that the burden of emergency services is coming from the ski area overlooks the fact that none of us would be here if it weren't for the ski area. Maybe there'd be 5 hermits living in the town of Alta if it weren't for the ski area. We all benefit from the ski operations, and I think we all have to share the public safety costs that entails.
So I'm going to try to, we do have another issue that I think needs to be discussed before our town council meeting to try to make the conversation at the town council meeting a little bit more streamlined. So I'm going to close this part of our work session unless you have strong objections to that. I'll just make the comment that as I understand it, we're going to get a bill in July for 700 and whatever that is, $39,000. Well, we're billed and paid quarterly, so it would be 25% of that, unless we take some other action. So I don't know about the timing of what Polly would be looking into. So the second item on our work session agenda is the extension of emergency proclamation number 1, which is set to expire on the 13th. So this is our opportunity to extend that. We have a resolution to extend it by another month, which would be, again, a few days, 5 days after our next town council meeting. I don't know, Polly, if there's the opportunity to extend it for longer than that. or not. But in any case, I think that since we have a town council meeting scheduled for May 8th, is it? We have a town council scheduled for May 6th. So, you know, a month is adequate. If we were not to extend this, all of the emergency proclamations that follow from emergency proclamation number 1, which was creating the legal framework for the rest of the any other emergency proclamations, would dissolve as well. And so, you know, the lodges could be open, we could have short-term rentals, we could have businesses open, food trucks, whatever. We would have the legal framework of the county, of course. Do you want to comment on that, Polly, or does anybody else want to weigh in?
I'm fine extending it another 30 days. I don't see any reason to not do that.
The governor's talking about extending his until the end of May, I think, Chris, and so is the county mayor talking about that at this point.
I believe that's the case, yeah, per the news anyways. And the county may be taking action like tomorrow in a special meeting, I believe, to extend the order.
My guess is we're creeping up on a stronger stay-at-home order by the county rather than a loosening of the distancing requirements.
Or at least by the governor. Yeah.
Can I make a quick comment?
And just so there's no statutory requirement in terms of the length of the extension. The idea, I think, behind the thought I had, at least with the 30 days, is just that it's a definable period of time and that you're going to have another council meeting within that period, so
Yeah.
that if there's still a need for it, still a state of emergency in 30 days, you can continue to extend it.
Right.
And what it does is it continues all those orders which the mayor has made, and also continues to show that we're in a state of emergency for the residents, the businesses of Alta.
Mike, you want to say something?
Yes. I just wanted to point out from the Marshal's Department point of view, having the order in effect gives us the ability to treat violations under town code rather than having to do it under a county or state code, which usually is a great benefit. Of course, would only do that in a very egregious situation, but it's a good tool for us to have.
Yeah, one other consideration there is that as long as the emergency order is in place, violations of an emergency order are a Class B misdemeanor, even if the underlying offense under the town code would be a Class C misdemeanor. Again, it's not like we're trying to punish people, but it does give us a little bit more. It's another tool if we were to need it, I guess, is what I would say.
And one of the first things that we have to establish on any call is, you know, are we legally there? And this order provides us that framework.
I'm in favor of extending.
Okay. Any other? Okay, well, that seems like we've covered that pretty well. Okay, if you want, I was going to say at 5 of, give people, you know, in a few minutes, I know that the work session goes till 5, but I was thinking that at 4:55, if we don't have something else, we could take a quick break. I would love to go get a glass of water. I forgot to bring one up to my desk. Is there anything else that somebody wants to say about the UFA or UFSA in a couple of minutes? All right, well then, I'm going to propose that we adjourn the work session and reconvene, and I have 4:53 on my computer. The magic of the internet must be right, right?
So how do we do that?
I think we just agree to do it. Do we need a motion to adjourn a work session? I don't think so.
No,
We
I
didn't have,
think
yeah.
more technically, should everyone just keep their videos going, or should
Oh.
we all sign out and get
Yes,
back in?
no. Sorry, Sheridan, I took your question to be a legal one as opposed to a technical one. I beg your pardon. I think I'm just going to leave this going. You can look at the flowers. I'm going to go get a glass of water and come right back.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Can I just make a quick announcement that
Yeah.
we do have, I finally figured out the broadcasting, and so it's just via a different link. So Chris is updating that on our website now for folks. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Jen, did you mean the YouTube link or the Zoom link?
No. No public is joining into the Zoom call. This is the YouTube URL. It's
Right,
been
okay.
changed. It was the only way I could figure out how to get this meeting to broadcast.
Right, so
Right.
Jay and Mark, you think that they will be able to get sound now?
Oh, I can unmute them. If are they having issues?
Well, Jay said that he wasn't getting the sound, and I don't know what Mark's
Are we talking about Zoom or YouTube?
YouTube.
I don't know how he would be on YouTube because the link has not been shared yet.
From the other link that you provided earlier?
It's not, the problem was it never broadcasted. That's what I've been working on for the last hour.
Right, okay.
The way I
Yeah,
solved
so-
it required a new URL and a new code and information. So that's being sent to Chris, being put on the website. And that's how people will be able
Okay.
to do it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Should be
so-
back up.
Yeah, hopefully they'll see that, yeah. Jay, I see that you joined, so did you join because you couldn't hear on YouTube?
Yeah, yep. I just joined the Zoom meet, so.
Okay.
There was
nice
no
pick.
video either, right, Jay?
No video.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Nice background, Jay.
Hey, how
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
We customized for the town.
I'm looking at the YouTube link. It's live.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Sorry, I don't have WordPress on my laptop.
Oh, it's backward. My head is backward. God, that's horrible.
You can actually fix that in your settings here. You can do the mirror image.
I am not going to watch that. I'm going to mute myself.
Chris, I'm on the website and trying to click the link.
I thought that he left.
Yeah, well, I was hoping you'd use the link first and upload it and get it going. Guess not.
Thank you, girls.
So Cliff, I had a similar problem at about 10 minutes before you did, and I ended up restarting my computer, which is how Zoom crashed on me, and then I couldn't reopen it, and I was like, oh, perfect timing. So, but
That-
restarting it did fix
Yeah.
that problem.
That did the trick. Thanks, Harris.
So I just had a question is, in terms of those documents that I referred to, are they going to be added to the record? Did there need to be a motion about that, or procedurally, how did we handle that?
Which documents? You mean the late comments?
No, sorry, the materials that I got from Jay that I gave to all the council members in March, and that were the basis of my comments today.
When we get to the resolution, why don't you just say that you request that they be added, and I'll just say without objection,
Okay, that's fine.
and we'll just add them to the record.
Okay.
And then you'll send them to me, Margaret?
Yeah, John has a copy of them. I think he got it in March or something, but yeah, I'll send them to you. One's an Excel spreadsheet and the other's a picture of some kind. I don't know what the document is, but I'll send them to you, Piper.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let me welcome everybody to is everybody back? Let me look. Elise just disappeared. Cliff. Okay, Sheridan, Cliff, Margaret, me, and Elise. Okay. Are we ready to go, Piper, in terms of the recording? It's still recording, I assume. You're muted, so I can't hear you.
You're talking to me. Yes, we are recording.
Oh, Jen, okay.
Yes, and the broadcast is going live now. We had to set up a new link, but it has been posted to the website.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'd like to call the meeting, the remote Alta Town Council meeting of Wednesday, April 8th, 2020 to order. Let me just say that since our last town council meeting on March 11th, it feels like an eternity has passed. Like the world we're in feels very different between earthquake and disease and telecommuting. It's a very different situation. So welcome everybody. I'm glad that we could meet this way. Okay, the first item on our agenda is citizen input. And Piper has received a couple of comments, and we asked for them in writing, given the format and given that these formats are a little bit vulnerable to being disrupted. And I will say we have a backup plan if we lose control of this public meeting. And what we would do, Jen, you want to just quickly describe what people should do?
Sure. Pay attention to your email outside of Margaret, who I'm going to text because she doesn't always get emails quickly. And we'll have a new meeting login and everything. So,
Yeah, well, essentially,
prepped, and ready to go to just hit send to you guys if that does happen. So it should be fairly quick.
Yeah. So we have a backup. We will reconvene with a new invitation if this meeting gets disrupted. Okay, citizen input. Piper, can you please give us, hi there, Joy.
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. This comment came from Mark Hake regarding the town of Alta annexing into the UFSA. The town of Alta should inventory all the currently approved sources of municipal water supply in the following approved change application file at the State Engineer's Office, Utah Division of Water Rights, and review how and where the water should be utilized for fire protection. He references 57-10009, 57-10013, and 57-10015. In addition, the water user claim WUC 57-8973 should as well be reviewed, as it claims Salt Lake City Public Utilities to serve following inhabitants, those within its SLCPU service areas in Salt Lake County, commuter workforce, and visitor populations. The visitor population being the most important to the economic well-being of the town of Alta. The town of Alta should also review the numerous other available water sources in the town of Alta to determine other water sources which could be diverted for fire protection to better serve the health, welfare, and safety of the community. Regarding the ongoing eternal review of parking circumstances in the town of Alta, the council should publicly review the following documents. Number one, the 1988 agreement to finish construction of a parking lot at SR 210 MP number 12 in the town of Alta, and the invoice for the work from UDOT. Number two, the 1991 agreement to extend and install asphalt for the parking lot at Grizzly Gulch at SR 210 MP 13 in the town of Alta. Number three, the 1997 town of Alta submittal to UDOT regards road status signed by Mayor Levitt. Number four, the 1997 town of Alta certification to UDOT regards road status. Number five, the 2000 town of Alta submittal to UDOT regards road status signed by Mayor Levitt. Number six, the 2003 town of Alta certification to UDOT regards road status. All of the foregoing affect where people park and jurisdictional questions of authority to govern parking. I've provided all of the above documents to Town of Alta Clerk Ms. Lever and submit them to the council for your review. Signed, Mark Hake. And I have those accompanying documents. I have a second communication from Dan Colangelo. Mayor Sondak and council members, we are homeowners in town. We strongly urge you to explore funding sources for fire and EMS services, which place the financial responsibility for those services upon those who most directly benefit from or use them. As reflected in the notes from your last meeting, the vast majority of usage is by visitors. In fact, a quick review shows approximately 36 homes which have no winter and limited summer access to these services. For us, if a fire or medical emergency were to occur, the chance of a timely response is very small. As a result, it seems that using property tax increases to fund service which property owners will never receive is both imprecise and unfair. It would seem a sound course of action would involve a thorough accounting review, negotiation, and the implementation of some combination of a transient room tax and town levied sales tax. Thank you for your time. Signed, Dan Colangelo and Carrie Gardner. And that's all I have, that things that were submitted by the deadline of 5 p.m. yesterday. You're muted.
Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a COVID-19 update by Chris Colley.
Am I unmuted? Standing in front of the Piper Horn. It's a nice place to take in a town council meeting. So yeah, what a month. I put together this little memo just, describing some of the course we've followed over the last few weeks and describing some of the things we've been doing at the town to try to confront the situation and manage it. It really is powerful to me to just take a step back and recall what we were talking about with regard to the pandemic, whether it was technically a pandemic or not at that point. I don't remember, but on the 11th, we were still 3 or 4 days from, ski areas all across the country closing. And, sometime during the day that following Saturday, Vail Resorts announced most of their resorts would close for the season. And I believe it was that Saturday evening, the 14th, that, following a flurry of communications amongst us locally, Alta ski area and Snowbird determined they would suspend operations. At that point, for at least a couple of weeks, those suspensions were extended. The town declared a state of emergency that evening. We were, I believe, the fifth municipality in Salt Lake County to make such a declaration at that point. I think it took another week for every other city in the Salt Lake Valley and Salt Lake County to declare a state of emergency. And of course now, most urban communities across the country have made similar declarations. The state of Utah requested a major disaster declaration from the federal government, and it was signed by the president a couple of days ago. And now only 3 states in the country, I believe Vermont, Wyoming, and Idaho, have not yet declared or been granted the status of a major disaster declaration, which is one of those funding pathways and pathways for resource assistance from FEMA to smaller units of government that is one reason why cities, counties, and states may make these emergency declarations. So, in the days that followed that pivotal day on the 14th, you all, I'm sure, are aware that one of the key events was this doorman in Park City testing positive and having no exposure to a COVID-19 positive patient or any relevant travel history. And that sort of opened the door to the understanding that we had community spread ongoing in Utah. Since then, Summit County has maintained the highest case rate by far of any county in the state, and that's consistent with other ski resort communities across the country, not necessarily including Alta. We're fortunate at this point not to share those characteristics. Blaine County, Idaho still has the highest case rate in the country. I was trying to look up that case rate recently and I couldn't find it, but yeah. So, obviously some of the information in this memo that I sent has changed. The Utah cases as of noon today, the governor's briefing, 1,846 confirmed cases, 158 hospitalizations, still 13 deaths in the state of Utah, and 858 cases in Salt Lake County. Of course, we have more cases in Salt Lake County than the other counties, but we are a much larger county in terms of population, and we have a lower case rate than a few counties in Salt Lake. So, I cited that cases were doubling every 3.8 days in Utah. That's no longer the case. I believe it's something it's higher. It's like 6 or 7 days, based on these rates. But again, these change daily, and they're subject to changes in the frequency of testing and other factors. Something I didn't speak to at all in this report is the modeling that entities are using to project, the peak case rate or the highest number of cases in the state. And depending on what model you look at, that's either happening on Friday, it's happening in 3 weeks, it's happening in a month, or it's happening in late July. So, really are still kind of in the relatively early stages of this, at least based on what we can understand with the data we have. So, Alta and Brighton still remain the only communities in Salt Lake County not to have a confirmed case among residents. We should be proud of that. We were fortunate to be able to discontinue commercial operations to the extent we were able to, and that's most likely a factor in why we don't have local cases. Obviously, down here in the valley where I'm sitting, and in most sort of relatively metropolitan areas, there's still going to be commerce ongoing to one extent or another, and that's why there continue to be new infections and new positive results, et cetera. So we have been communicating a lot with Brighton. I've been communicating a lot with Brighton, mostly through Jenna Malone, who's an Alta person who's a council member over there. And they're asking a lot of the same questions we are asking here in terms of, visitation by non-resident property owners, recreation visitation from the valley. They have some of the same economic uncertainties we have about the future, et cetera. And so that's been great to be able to follow along with them and know that we have sort of a teammate in our neighboring canyon. Obviously, one of our main focuses has been figuring out ways to protect ourselves via the emergency powers that the mayor, that we, provided to the mayor in passing our first declaration of emergency. And, you're all aware that the mayor has passed 4 emergency proclamations, making various orders over the last couple of weeks. And I listed some of the effects of those in this report. My role as an emergency manager, I've been more active in that than I ever have. I mean, the pandemic is, the biggest deal for us here in the state of Utah in terms of an emergency or a disaster that we've ever had in terms of a statewide condition. And so the entire emergency management community in the state of Utah is activated, and particularly here in the Salt Lake Valley. I've been facilitating a lot of internal communication, daily video calls and email briefings. I get 30 emails a day from Salt Lake County Emergency Management about intelligence and monitoring critical functions. I'm sure you all know that personal protective equipment for first responders and medical professionals there's a tremendous shortage of that equipment. And that is, I would say, the primary focus of the regional emergency management effort is to identify, exploit, and improve supply chains for PPE. So there's a ton of communication going on with regard to that. We are privy to the benefits of some of that coordination. Mike Morey and I are both on the receiving end of some additional PPE that we'll be distributing to the Marshal's Department and to the Alta Clinic over the next couple days. So we're really fortunate to have relatively modest needs for that kind of stuff, and that so far we've been able to meet the needs that we have. So, going forward, we have some progress to make, some improvements to realize in terms of cost accounting and sort of reporting of our emergency activities to the county, to the state, and to the feds. There's the story changes every day, like I've been saying, with regard to what opportunities are available to local governments, businesses, and individuals. And it's just, on one hand, it's a matter of posturing, and on the other hand, it's a matter of sound administration to remain in position to take advantage of some of these opportunities. And as you may have heard, some of the rollout of some of these programs, like the Small Business Administration program, has not been super streamlined or successful up to this point. So we remain vigilant for news of assistance programs for local governments. There's a possibility that a future act of Congress would appropriate funds for local government assistance. And that's something that we're going to be trying to improve our understanding of here in the next month. So that's all I really have to say about this. It's a lot of work and a lot of, we spent a lot of time coordinating amongst the staff, and I spent a lot of time communicating with outside agencies about all this stuff. And, we're learning as we go and as the information changes. And that's the position we're in.
Yeah, I'll just add that one of the benefits of having the emergency order in place is that we've limited not just access to the town offices for the safety of everybody, but also some of the functions of the town office. And I just really want to thank Chris for the really dedicated and excellent job he's been doing as our emergency manager. Over the couple of years before this happened that I've been mayor, Chris and I had several conversations about, I gotta really get up to make sure I'm really ready for when I need to act as an emergency manager. And despite not feeling ready, Chris has really stepped up to the task, and I think has been ready. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Chris? It looked, Margaret, like you had one.
Yeah, I do. Actually, a question and a comment. And the question was, your memo talks about the total number of tests in, I don't know what area, whether it's the state or the county, and it's 20,000. And so I didn't know if you had an update on that. And then the additional question or comment was, I really appreciate the fact that the parking area for Grizzly has been closed to residents only. I think it's helped to spread out the people on the trail. Not so much today. There were a ton of people, and I passed a gathering of about 18, and they were less than 3 feet apart. But overall, I think that effort has really helped to encourage social distancing, at least in my experience. So thank you for that, Chris, Mike, Harris, everybody.
You're welcome. I'm glad to hear that it seems to have been somewhat effective. We were concerned about the number of people at that trailhead, especially given that our residents park and get into their snow machines there. And we didn't want you to feel bunched up on, let alone the idea that bunching up was a dangerous thing for those people themselves. If you do see groups that are behaving inappropriately or individuals pooping in the woods, you can let the marshal's office know. Like I said, we're not going to be having an effort to arrest people or, punish them. But the trucks, our town trucks do have speakers on them, and we can order groups to disperse if they are within earshot. Of course, if they're further up on the trail, then that's a different issue.
Margaret,
Okay.
36,000 tests as of today. Thanks for reminding me.
Okay. Anything else for Chris on this issue? One thing that's going to
question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Sheridan.
Thank you. Just wanted to add my commendations to your hard work, Chris, your work, Mayor, Mike, and all of the town staff. It's been very impressive, and it's hard to believe that an earthquake was combined with all of this. So good job, everybody. And Chris, I'm wondering just a little bit about some of the projections about intensive care beds. Can you speak to that, or has that really come up with some of your discussions with Salt Lake? Some of the projections I've seen say that that's where we might have a shortfall.
I guess my first reaction was that I thought the projections were that we are going to have enough ICU beds and enough ventilators. I believe here in Utah, I know that I think I've just really mostly through like media surveillance noticed conversations about Utah potentially being in a position to send some of those afield at some point, if our case rate trajectory remains what it is today here in Utah. So I guess I can't really comment on that aside from, what I've seen in the media. And I know I think there are a couple different, I don't know if they're public health agencies or research entities that are providing those projections at at a high level and at a more granular level, like a county level and a state level. And so I don't know whether they're using different modeling per, county or state, or if they're using the same modeling and applying it to, I don't know how that modeling works. But certainly I've seen one product that suggests that we are essentially ahead of that particular curve. So there may very well be others that suggest we're not ahead of that curve. And like I said, the projection for when at peak cases in Utah is going to occur, they're all over the place. There's one that says it's Friday of this week. There are some that say it's April 25th, and then there are some that say it's in the middle of the summer. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris before I move on? Okay. All right. The next item on our agenda is discussion and possible action on Resolution 2020 R5, a resolution extending for 30 days the emergency proclamation number 1 that I issued last month. So I would ask for a motion and a second to pass Resolution 2020 R5, and then I'll invite discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Margaret, I think Elise got to the second before you did, a second before. So that was a motion made by Sheridan and seconded by Elise. Now, we did talk about this during the work session. Is this document someplace for the public to see, Jen, at the moment?
It's on the Town of Alta's website.
Okay, I'm going to just, for the sake of
It's on our agenda page.
I think this is it here. Yeah, okay, so I've now shared the screen that shows Resolution 2020 R5. And so there is some preamble that talks about our authority and where we have come. I've issued Proclamation 1, which is the framework, and 2, 3, and 4 are effective as long as Proclamation 1 is in effect. We say some more about the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then we say it is let it be resolved by the town. It is resolved by the town council to extend the local emergency proclamation number 1 until May 13th, 2020, and this resolution would become effective immediately. Okay, so that's what's before us. Is there any discussion? And I can put the document back up if anybody wants to look at a particular passage.
I had a question, Harris, and that was on page 1, the third from the bottom of the page, the whereas regarding the proclamations 2 through 4. The only question is, and maybe this is a Polly question, is it says unless they're amended or rescinded by the mayor, should or would, or is it necessary or appropriate to say and or the town council? If, for example, you weren't available or whatever, is there a reason to add a clause about that?
So this is dictated by state law, and the state law gives the mayor the authority to issue the proclamations, but requires that the town council consent to extend it if need be beyond 30 days. So basically what you're doing is saying that the mayor can continue in his role. If for some reason the mayor wasn't available, then you would go through the similar, the mayor pro tem. There are certain also authorities that the town marshal would have, but those are more limited and more aligned with if there needs to be an evacuation, that type of thing. But so it's very statutory in terms of the authority.
So the amendment and rescission of any of those proclamations has to be done by the mayor, and the council's authority is merely to extend what has already been put in place by the mayor, if necessary.
Correct. So the orders kind of follow along with the initial emergency proclamation, and the timing of them, they're effective as long as the first one is effective. So
right,
that's correct.
We haven't, because it hasn't so far been necessary, but we could talk about succession plans, and I think that we actually have some in place, and Chris, you could speak to that. But if I'm not available for whatever reason, then Cliff would step into that role as mayor pro tem. If both, I don't recall what happens, Chris, if both Cliff and I are somehow unavailable, and given that we're talking about a pandemic, I guess it's worth reviewing that.
Yeah, we have to submit a statement. Well, there's a default emergency line of succession in state code, and municipalities have the option of submitting a custom emergency line of succession. And I don't remember whether this year we submitted something. So yes, that's correct. It's mayor pro tem, and then it may be chief law enforcement officer or chief administrative officer. I forget, but it's defined somewhere.
Minute, Chris, and it is as you described. It goes mayor pro tem, chief law enforcement officer, then town administrator.
Okay.
John always wanted to be mayor, but he has to.
Well, and I also know that typically if for some reason the mayor and mayor pro tem weren't available, you would still have a quorum, which is 3, and the quorum could appoint somebody to step in for the mayor pro tem if they had to.
Okay. Any additional further discussion on this motion that's before us? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Polly, how do we vote in a situation like this?
It's just like a regular resolution.
So everybody speaks at once.
Everybody votes. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to do a roll call vote, you can, but
I'd
it's
be
just
happy
like
to call the roll.
So there's also a reaction button, I think, at the bottom of your screens, and you can have a thumbs up there if you wanted to. That would be a visual way that you could vote yes. I don't see a thumbs down option. Okay, so I'll just call the question. All those in favor, please either give us a thumbs up, which I just saw from Cliff and Margaret, or an audible yes. I'll vote yes too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I,
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So any opposed? I think that I just counted all yeses. Good. Okay. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Alta ski area update by Mike Mon, who is unmuted at the moment. And so, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to express first a big thank you to everyone. You know, we're traveling through uncharted waters, and it's like everybody says, it seems like it's been a month since this started. And I really appreciate the communication we've had between the town and the other entities. I think we have had a lot of communication, and we've worked well together to kind of get us to where we're at currently. We went from 541 employees to, we're down to about 90 now. We've gotten rid, all of our seasonals have moved on. We just have our essential, kind of our summer staff now working. Many of them have chosen to take time off at this period of time, and others are working from home, but about 80% of our employees would need to come to the ski area to do their job. We have extended our, we go to a 4-day work week in the summer. We're staying with a 7-day work week to spread out people and practicing social distancing in the workplace. And we have really upped our efforts in trying to keep surfaces clean in the workplace. And so it's, we've continued to work a little bit with the Forest Service and talking about the summer. At this point in time, it will depend upon conditions as we go forward, but we're intending to do some more work with the Albion parking lot on the east end, cutting into that bank, doing some paving, and that material would then go to Sunnyside Pitch 1, or the last pitch of Home Run, and take some of the steepness out of that slope for beginner skiers. We also intend to, the contractors indicated that they still intend to come and finish the Alf's construction. They're looking at a June 1st start date. We will plow the road at some point in time and let it try to get melted out in time for that. That, of course, is all contingent upon where things go with this virus in the immediate future. We are also currently planning we're planning for summer operations, but that's also contingent upon what happens. Our summer operations would include kind of scaled back a little bit more. We would run the fee booth, and we would have a small campground type store, not a store that you would go into, but one you could walk up to a window and ask for something that would have some snacks and things that maybe could be used by campground hosts and hikers. No plans to run a lift, no plans to have the Albion Grill open for any food service. We would have restrooms open, either in the Albion ticket office or the Albion Grill. We are looking at remodeling the Albion ticket office restrooms this summer, so they will be offline at some point in time, and we would use the ones in the grill for the summer. In regards to the discussion that was had a little bit earlier about the USFA and the direction to go, I'd just like to, a few comments I would make is, you know, when you look at the budget for the town of Alta, and you realize that 86% of the revenues that operate all of our services within the town come from taxes. And of that 86%, 74% come from a sales or a use tax, and only 26% are coming from property taxes. So we are heavily right now currently a lot of the revenues that the town has to operate on come from the visitors, come from the users who are spending money here in the town of Alta. It is not all being carried by the burden of the people, the property owners within the town of Alta. You know, we have a great police force. We have, you know, all the administration the town does, and all of those other things. All of that is currently available to the level it is because of the visitors that do come and pay sales tax or use tax in some form or another to enable us to have these services. So trying to have that proper balance. I mean, we should maybe look at what other resort communities are doing and how that's balanced. I think you'll find that, you know, we are benefiting from, the town does benefit significantly, and the users that do come help us fund a lot of the services that we have. Recognizing this property tax change to join the USFA seems like a significant, or is a big change, and it seems like a significant burden that appears to be all being placed upon the property owners. But I think you have to look at the picture as a whole, all of our revenue sources, all of our taxes, and how we're operating. And when you look at it like that and you compare it to other entities and other resort communities in particular, I think it's in line and it's appropriate. And we would encourage from Alta Ski Lift Company, the town, to get this issue resolved with the UFA. And it seems that the USFA, joining the USFA, is the most appropriate course of action at this point in time. Let's see if you had anything else. I don't know that I have anything else on my list other than, do you have any questions for the skier?
I just wanted to commend you for closing as swiftly as you did. Great job. I'm sure that was a difficult decision, and tried to put that in writing on your website. I saw you getting kind of hammered from some folks, and I thought it was misplaced. And so good job. Good job with that.
Well, thank
and
you.
I did have sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. I apologize.
It was, I mean, a lot happened in the 3 hours from, I just had met with all my management team and we'd send everybody out the door for a normal day the next day. And then the next 3 hours, a lot changed. So, but it was the right move, the right thing for us to do. You know, we have people that have beat us up and people that have applauded us. Likewise, we have that similar situation with the current uphill policy here within the town of Alta. We have those that are not happy with it, consider us being socially irresponsible for allowing uphill traffic. And then we have a lot of people that are very appreciative. And we've been working closely with Harris and the Forest Service through this issue to try to figure out how to appropriately do what we're doing in a way that minimizes risk and provides access to the forest that's out there. So that continues to go on. That's evaluated every day whether we should be continuing to do that, but it's not purely our decision. It's a decision that has to involve the town, the county, and the Forest Service as we move forward in any direction in that regard.
Well, I also just wanted to say, and I don't know if you can see, I'm the bridge. You're doing an excellent job on this uphill thing, and the amount of work and the people and the cats and the groomers and the patrol. I mean, it's an awful lot of work for a closed area, and it's going very, very well. I think a lot better recently. I mean, you don't have any say over how many people come and stand at the beginning of the summer road, but thank you. It's been an excellent job, and I get a lot of compliments on what you've been doing with that. So,
thank you.
Can you speak your decision making around that at all, Mike, with regard to how it's evaluated daily, the risks and the rewards? Just as it doesn't make the lift company any money, I'm curious as to why we're an outlier based on the county we're in and Summit County.
Well, part of the challenge that we have here is because we have a mix of private and public lands, and there's no really trailheads or developed public trailheads outside the ski area services. You know, we could close uphill traffic and close our restrooms, but that is not in the best interest, I believe, of the town of Alta or the people that live here, because then people would still come, flood the north side of the canyon, flood Grizzly Gulch with no service. And so as we kind of looked at that, when we had that storm a couple of weeks ago and we closed uphill traffic. Well, we closed our restrooms too, because that was on this side of the road, and that became a little bit of an issue. And then immediately Harris called, and the Forest Service called and asked, if we would consider opening those restrooms back up. And so we kind of decided that was probably the best thing to do as a partner in this community, is to provide restrooms, and then opening up the mountain helps us to disperse the people that are coming, so they're not all congregating in one place and spreading out. So that's kind of that decision we look at. We look at that on a daily basis. We are faced with some risk that we have employees that have to clean those restrooms, and they have concerns that, they're maybe having the highest risk in our company at this point in time, because they're going into where having potentially the most contact with someone that could be here with the virus. So we look at that. We're in communication with Harris and the Forest Service. Our position is if we get to a point that we need to close, that the whole town should be closed. There should be no uphill traffic in the town of Alta on private or public lands, and we would close the parking lots at the same time and have the town just be open for visitors and employees as needed. There's been some question, as Harris and I have dealt with the Forest Service, whether we can do that without the Forest Service's blessing. And so it's kind of a three-way discussion we have on an ongoing basis to determine if we get to a point that we need to change what we're doing, it's going to involve all three of us. Is that correct, Harris?
Yeah, no, I think you put that just right, Mike. If the ski area were to close the parking lots, their parking lots, and I said something about this in a newsletter column today, the Forest Service thinks they have to be involved in that decision. They would be fine with closing the parking lots to avoid gatherings, but closing the Forest Service ground that is even under the special use permit was a little bit problematic from the point of view of the Forest Service, because they're worried about where everybody else would go. It would not stop people coming up Little Cottonwood Canyon. They'd go, White Pine would be very crowded. Superior would be crowded. Snowbird made it very clear to me that they will not prohibit hiking on their private ground, which is quite a bit of what is just above the town of Alta. So, and there's parking, there could be parking outside of the parking lots. And so it's not a perfectly straightforward solution. In addition, Salt Lake County order and the governor's directive allow people to leave their homes and travel for outdoor recreation. And while we have actually been a little bit in front of the county on some issues, we've worked pretty hard to coordinate with them and not get too far out in front on the issues, and for fear that they or the state would simply overrule us, which they have the authority to do. So those are some of the considerations from my point of view. I really appreciate what Mike, the communication between the ski area and the town, like Mike said, has been outstanding. It's one of the side benefits of the situation we're in is it's easy to find people, it seems like. So, I text Mike and I say, you got a minute to talk, and the next thing I know, my phone is ringing. And that's actually been true for everybody, because everybody's just kind of hanging around. Not that we're not working. I think we're all working pretty hard, but it's mostly right here at this screen.
And I would tell you, our objective as our ski lift company is to try to keep all of our employees working with appropriately social distancing as long as we can, until we get to an order that changes that, so we can continue to provide them employment and they can take care of their families.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate what you're doing, Mike. Obviously, you're not making any revenue, and I know this is a multi-million-dollar hit to your bottom line, given the lack of revenue and the continuing expenses. And one thing that I really appreciate is the service that you're providing in terms of being first responders to emergencies in our community, along with the UFA and the marshals.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else for Mike? Okay, thank you for your.
Actually, I did. I had one other quick question. Forgive me. I just wondered, Mike, if you, because if the taxes do go up on property, of course, the ski lift company will be paying a great deal more. I wondered if you folks had done any ballpark figures about what that would be if we did join the UFSA.
I think we went out and looked at it and saw the increase. I mean, I think we calculated it at one time. I don't have that number off the top of my head, though. You know, I think we were, I don't, yeah, I would have to go look.
That's okay. I was just curious.
We did look at it, and we looked at, you know, the impact, and we just didn't know that there was a better answer, given the capabilities that the town has to raise revenues. We're kind of maxed out on the sales tax, pretty close, and there's the transient room tax, but that's kind of one-sided. It just seemed like that's an appropriate way to go, particularly if 50% of the property tax base is commercial here in the town too.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry,
Margaret?
I just one comment. I wanted to add my kudos as well, Mike, in that plowing the summer road is really helpful. We're trying not to use our OSV, and so with it being plowed periodically, it really helps being able to walk on that roadway. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
All right. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, the March 11th, 2020 meeting minutes, treasurer's report with highlights and staff report. Is there a motion to approve those, to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Was there a
Second.
Okay, thank you. Motion was made by Cliff and seconded by Elise. I'll just point out on the budget highlights aspect that we've had a pretty good year, and even though the year got cut 6 weeks short, I think that we're going to be in pretty good shape through this budget year. We'll have an amended budget, of course, to discuss, but I think we're going to be okay. I'm assuming we have Piper and I have been working to figure out what based on previous years revenue from the middle of March to the end of the ski season through the end of June, what we would expect not to be taking in. But I don't think it's going to be a appreciably big hit. What we're doing going forward is assuming, and I don't mean to jinx anybody, but like Mike said, it's quite uncertain what's going to happen this summer. So since the bulk of our revenue is not in the summer, we're in much better shape, I think, than some ski towns that have a lot of summer business. You know, I can't imagine what's happening to say Aspen or Telluride or Jackson's, you know, budget picture, or Park City for that matter. Although I did hear something about that from Andy Bierman in a CWC meeting this week. So I think that we'll be making an assumption of basically zero revenue until November, which is, I hope, way overly conservative. Any other discussion about the motion that's before us?
Did you see that?
Mike Mon
Sorry.
had a comment?
Okay, Mike, go ahead, and then I'll ask you, Sheridan. You got to unmute yourself, Mike.
Okay.
There you go.
I lost my screen or something. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just, we've had quite a discussion within the ski industry of what we think this is going to look at long term. There's a fairly good consensus that we will not see a season like last season or how this season started going into next season, that, if this virus is even under control, the impact on the economy that, everyone is kind of projecting that, we're thinking we could be down as much as 20 to 25% for next season. Just wanted to share that with you as you consider your budget too going forward.
Yeah, we're talking being about how to be quite conservative. Sheridan?
Sorry, I just seen that Mike wanted to make a comment and wasn't sure if you were aware. So, yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Cliff, you unmuted yourself. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, thanks.
Okay. All right. So I'll call the question on the approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, I got some thumbs up and I got some ayes. Any opposed? Okay, that was carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, good. We're right on schedule, just about a couple minutes within. UFA report, Jay. If you'd like to let us know what's going on.
Hello, how is everybody?
Hanging in there.
I wish I were up there with y'all. I think you tend to be safer up there than we are down here. I just wanted to review a couple things with you. So I sent in a report for the first quarter of this year based on the call volume. If you haven't seen that, I'm happy to go over it. I was just reviewing that, and I think that there was a typo on there. They had indicated that there were 51 total incidents, and that's not correct. There were 64 as I'm adding them up individually. So for January, February, March, 64 total incidents. Significant slowdown, obviously, with March and the ski areas shutting down in years past. Pretty evident that not as many calls. So the crew down at 113 has been hunkered down as well. Still available and ready to respond, but just with the amount of visitors up there decreasing, the call volume has gone down. As you can imagine, we've been extremely busy just in the planning phase and the planning process here at UFA, making sure that we are in a position to be able to respond and be able to help and do our part as things continue to get busier. Luckily, it has been just the planning process and the planning phase, and I'm hoping that we benefit from watching what has happened across the country and other parts of the country that have been faced with this prior to us. I think that is going to help us significantly in the things that we've been able to put in place, both for us as emergency responders as well as the hospitals. So I'm hoping that we'll be in a good position to respond as we see more and more people that come COVID positive. I don't know if Chris went over the latest numbers, but the latest numbers as far as Salt Lake County is concerned, this was as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, so 868 positive confirmations of COVID within Salt Lake County. Of those, 78 are hospitalized, and to date, we have 7 deaths within Salt Lake County. They are keeping track of the number of beds that are available in our hospitals. I heard Sheridan ask a question about that. So Salt Lake County is keeping tabs on the number of beds available in the hospitals, as well as the number of ICU beds that are available. Right now, we've been visiting the hospitals almost daily and staying in touch with them as they are our partners to make sure that the things that we're doing in cooperation with them are working. And the hospitals are seeing, they're empty right now for the most part. People are not going there, which is good. So we have space available. Our call volume overall is down from historical call volume during the same month in years past. So that's good. People aren't calling as much. And I think that part of that is the media involvement, educating people about what's appropriate to call for, taking care of themselves and staying put in home and isolating themselves. So that seems to be working. We are keeping track of our personnel and making sure that our personnel is appropriately equipped so that when they do respond to the possibility of anyone that may have COVID or have been exposed to anybody that does, we get notifications so that we can prepare and plan for that as we're responding to those calls and make sure that those that do have interaction with those patients are appropriately have their personal protective equipment on. So our plan when we do that is we limit, we're doing things completely different than we have in the past. And it's been hard for us to do that. When we go on a call, usually we're all hands on deck, and we're still all hands on deck, but we're doing so in a reserved way. So initially it's one person that makes contact with the patient with a second person ready to jump in and help them if needed. And then the rest of the crew is waiting outside in communication with the crew that's inside, but we're just trying to limit our exposure to the possibility. We're trying to make sure that we're not getting sick so that we have staff available as this changes over time. At this point, we've had 268 responses to possible COVID scenarios. Of those, 1,270 of our personnel have been exposed, but they've been exposed with PPE on. And so we don't automatically test any of those people, but we document that they have had a possible. And we don't do any testing. We ask that the people are careful, that they take their PPE off appropriately so that there's minimal exposure. And then if they do start to have any kind of signs and symptoms, we automatically isolate them and we get them tested at that point. So to this point, we've only had 26 of our people that have had what we would call symptoms, and that we test after that. 26 operational people. Of those 26 people, only one has come back with a positive test. And that one person had traveled just prior to them becoming ill. And so it's likely that they were exposed somewhere outside of the Salt Lake area and brought it back with them. So we're lucky that we've only had one person that's tested positive so far, and they've actually gone through their cycle and they're back to work. They've had their 14 days. They're now symptom-free and they're back to work. So I think we're doing a good job of keeping tabs on our own people. We have plans in place to take care of our personnel as well as their families if they are exposed or they have any kind of issues, so that we can immediately take them out of the mix and make sure that they're not exposing other UFA personnel or people in the public, so that we're not spreading this ourselves. We are working closely with Salt Lake County Emergency Management. They have their incident management team set up, but we have also set up a separate incident management team just for UFA and just for our own incident response. We do daily shift briefing with that incident management team that goes out to all of our shift personnel. So that happens every 48 hours as we change shifts. So we do a short 10 to 15 minute briefing, letting the crews that just come on shift know what the most up-to-date information is, know if there's any change in how we're proceeding, so that they have the most up-to-date information. On the odd days in between that, we have planning sessions where we plan for the coming day. So it's set up just like a large incident would be on a fire or an earthquake or any kind of disaster, where it's the incident management system where you have an operations component, planning component, a logistics component, and a finance component. And all of those things are set up to make sure that we're managing this appropriately. It's been interesting. It's different for us because it's not an incident that you can see. As you guys are dealing with the same thing, it's easy to, I say it's easy. It's not easy to deal with a large fire, but you can see it, and you kind of know when you're making progress. Where this is something that is completely out of the ordinary for us. So it's been a work in progress. I can assure you that there's great people, super smart people working on this, and making sure that the services that we're providing are the best that we can provide. We have contingency plans in place, what's called COOP, so continuity of operations plans. So based on staffing, based on call volume, based on what's happening within the hospitals, those plans are in place to be able to maneuver and move personnel into different areas to be able to continue providing both medical service and fire service. That's one of the things, is just because this is happening doesn't stop everything else that's going on. We're still having fire calls, we're still having car accidents, and all the things that we normally would. We're just approaching it a little bit differently. Any questions for me so far? I mean, that's a lot, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of background in how we're approaching this and what we're doing as a fire department and an EMS department.
Thank you so much for everything you're doing, and all of your crews. I'm sure we all feel that way. Just a couple outline questions, if you don't mind. So I've heard that domestic violence calls have been going up all over the country. Are you folks some of the first responders to those? Can you speak to whether or not that's really happening in Salt Lake County and how you're managing that?
I haven't seen specific numbers, but I've heard the same reports that there has been an increase in those calls. We work cooperatively with our law enforcement partners to respond to those. Anytime we have any kind of domestic violence call, we work hand in hand with our law enforcement partners to make sure that we're responding appropriately and that our personnel is safe. That's been one of the challenges for us, is, like you said, normally we go in and we have several people that are going in to help out, but we don't want to expose several people if somebody is sick. So it has been a little bit of a different approach for us. It's a work in progress, but there is definitely a significant uptick in those types of calls.
Margaret, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Harris. It was just based upon, Jay, your comment earlier that you had provided call volumes or information earlier, and I didn't see that. So maybe it went to the mayor or the clerk's office or something. But so it was just that I was interested in seeing that, and I didn't get it so far, unless somehow I missed it.
I can email it to you as soon as we're done here.
Great, thank you.
Good. One thing I need to add as part of our continuity of operations plan, one of the things that may happen, we have four of our stations have crews that are set up with both a fire engine and an ambulance, similar to how they're set up at 113. So they have a crew that, based on what the call is, they will either take the fire engine or they'll take the ambulance. So if it gets really busy in the Salt Lake Valley and we need to staff additional ambulances, the plan is to take those ambulances and staff them to be placed in different parts of all of UFA's response area to be able to respond to calls as they're happening on an as-needed basis. So that may take the ambulance out of Station 113 and put it somewhere else based on the current need, but it would not take the crew out. So that you would still have paramedic response. They would just be responding on the fire engine instead of the ambulance, and then the ambulance for that medical response, if needed, would be coming from somewhere else in the Salt Lake Valley.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Can you stay with us for a little bit
course.
longer? Yeah, because we may have, when we get to the UFA, UFSA membership question, there may be some issues that come up that we could ask you, want to ask you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, are there questions regarding the departmental reports? Mike, do you want to say anything beyond what we already know?
You know, I don't think that I have a lot. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I don't have a lot of things to say that haven't already been said in this meeting, but I do want to thank everybody, in particular the ski area, for working with us, daily, so that we can maintain a good rescue posture. Generally speaking, we believe we're seeing substantial compliance with the social distancing and gathering regulations that we're asking the public to participate with us on. We've only had a few times, including one this morning. I'm curious if it's the same event that Margaret saw. We did get a call about a gathering. It turned out to be a family unit. And at our request, they were happy to disperse. And so we've had good cooperation from the public. One of the interesting things that we've been doing is, the town does not have a local health component. So the Salt Lake County Health Department, serves as our health authority. And in a law enforcement role, we've tried to be useful in gaining intelligence and real-time information on what our COVID exposures may be. I think it's probably pretty common knowledge in the community that we've had at least one lodge that's had guests contact them after they return to their home state and that they've tested positive for the virus. So what we've been doing is our own sort of analog contact tracing, making the rounds daily with lodge management, employees, everybody in the community that we can, homeowners, just to make sure that everybody's working off the same page. There's a general awareness, those potentials. Luckily, thus far, we haven't had any residents, current employees or staff become ill with the virus. We've chased down a couple of pieces of information, and in some cases just out and out rumors about lodge employees returning to their home states and testing positive with the virus. So we're maintaining a spatial awareness so that if we have to deploy our first responders to any building in town, that we've got the intelligence to support extra protective measures if needed. Because we operate our own dispatch center, we don't have all the technology that Salt Lake County has available. In their CAD dispatching system, they're able to flag addresses for what they call universal precautions. So that if somebody has a communicable disease that's known, or maybe violent history, any responders would be alerted to that. In Alta, we have to rely a little bit on our memory. We reached out to Salt Lake County Health to ask us how they would communicate problem addresses to us. Their response is, we would not, because you're not a health agency. So understanding that reality, we've taken extra measures with VAC, the 911 call taking center, and we have their 100% support and cooperation that they will share all flagged address information with us. And so far, there's been no addresses in Alta that have been flagged with these kind of hazards. Other than that, I'm open to take any questions that anybody might have.
I just want to say one, I guess, footnote to what Mike just said about the Salt Lake County Health Department. It was in a meeting. I've been attending meetings that the mayor of Salt Lake County has held for it's her command staff and all of the mayors in Salt Lake County. We've been having meetings every. They're scheduled for Friday afternoons, but they've occurred more often than that. And in one of those, this issue of the CAD system flagging addresses where people were had been identified to have a problem like this came up, and I asked, was VEC aware of this, and they promised me that that would be an alternative way of getting that information. And it sounds, Mike, like that's actually they've come through with that, although I suppose we haven't really tested that system because we haven't had a case in Alta.
No, and as a backup to that, we've instituted procedures at the marshal's office for distancing all of our personnel and how we're rotating through shared quarters, the decontamination of shared workspaces, and all that. Sort of lost my train of thought, but what I was getting at is one of the procedures is if we're responding to a building while we're en route, we're going to be making that call to make sure that the address is not flagged. So we're just not going to take, faith that the system's working as promised. We're going to take the additional measures to verify.
Yeah, and just for everybody, the town council members' information, just in the last few days, Mike and Chris and I, with the rest of the staff participating in the conversation, talked about an ultraviolet device that will allow the police, anyone actually, but for the marshals, to decontaminate their the small items, radios, etc. Okay, any additional comments on the staff reports? I mean, on the departmental reports? Margaret, that looked like you might want to say something, but okay. All right, then I'm going to move on to the mayor's report. Like I started off this meeting with, it seems like a very long time since we've met, although it's only a month. It feels like much longer than that. And obviously COVID-19 has been the main event. Alta's events that have been canceled that I was going to go to included the UFA Gala, the Alta Gala, a couple of doctor's appointments, classes at the university, meetings at the university, and a school play for Kate's 9-year-old. So all of those were given up. I have been part of, like I just said, I have been part of the Salt Lake County Mayor's Weekly Update meeting, and I've had several conversations with Erin Mendenhall, who I've been impressed with and didn't know until she took office. We had some interesting conversations between the mayors of Salt Lake City, Moab, Park City, and me to talk about how to deal with the situation of so many visitors coming into our locations. We've talked about the fact that I've issued 4 emergency orders, and there's a pretty good timeline and review of them on the website, and in my most recent newsletter, I amplified some of what I said about the I amplified some of the purpose of order number 4, which I think had confused some people. It was not meant to be targeted primarily at second home owners. It was that our previous orders to this one were about short-term rentals, and there didn't seem to be a very good legal way to keep people from renting long-term, because people do that all the time as just part of the course of their lives. And what I was mostly concerned about was lots of people hearing that there were empty condos and other opportunities to get out of hotspots by coming to Alta and renting starting, say, April 1st through June 30th. And that was a big target of that proclamation. We added that second homeowners specifically were also included, but it was not meant to single them out. I already have said something about our budget assumptions. I know I filled out my census form on April 2nd, less than a week ago. Again, that feels like 6 months ago to me somehow, and I just wonder what's going to happen with the census. I hope it's accurate. On the March 17th UFA board meeting, we mostly talked about HR issues that were quite detailed. There are a handful of several longstanding employees who had a complicated HR issue about Medicare contributions. There were some, it turns out that a number of UFA employees are in the National Guard, and there was a question about how to handle their leave. And then, as I mentioned earlier in this meeting, the UFA has had some unbudgeted for overtime costs because of some smaller than desired staffing levels. And I know, Jay, that there's been some efforts to increase recruitment. And you reported on that in the last meeting that that's been going pretty well. So I know Chief Peterson has some strategies for how to deal with that. On March 18th, we had an earthquake. As you all know, my feeling was we got a pandemic, we got an earthquake. I was just waiting to see if we got locusts, and then I knew we were really in trouble. I got a little bit of heat about the earthquake personally from Clint Meekum, the county's emergency manager, because on March 18th, or rather during our 52-hour long interlodge, I met with Clint in the Emergency Operations Center along with Jay. And during that event, I said my fingers were crossed that we don't have an earthquake, but I did not say knock on wood. And Clint called me on not having said that. There was a CWC meeting on March 20th. There was a land tenure committee meeting on which I sit. The question was really what to do regarding a replacement for the land exchange from Mountain Accord and the first year of the Central Wasatch Commission. I don't have, the question was raised. Did not walk away from that meeting with a clear sense of what the answer was going to be. So I don't have a lot to report on that. In the April 9th meeting of the CWC whole board, we passed an amended ILA, which will be coming to the town council for approval. We omitted the positions of the appointed commissioners representing the interest of UDOT and the Wasatch Back, and converting the Wasatch Back appointed commissioner position, which is currently filled by someone from Summit County, that is Chris Robinson, into the membership of Summit County into the CWC. Of course, they would have to join the ILA, providing for the appointment of ex officio commissioners, for example, the UTA or UDOT if they were so inclined, but UTA is the big is the party who were really interested in making sure that they come to the meetings, to allow the town of Brighton to join. And then we discussed possible budget issues, given a couple of things. One is, like I said a few minutes ago, I think our budget, at least 1920, is okay. 2021, Mike addressed, if we lose 20 or 25% of our sales tax revenue, that's a big issue for the town. But we're not in as bad shape as some of the towns in the other members of the CWC could well be. So far, Summit County and Park City have not remitted what they owe for the 1920 budget year, so they'll have to do something about that, and it's not clear that they are going to give their full amounts of, I think it's $100,000 and $75,000 respectively. There is not a good formula for assessing the different communities, and it makes sense to me that you would be asking me, well, why should we pay $15,000 instead of $10,000 or $20,000? And for us, $15,000 is not nothing, but $100,000 that Park City paid the first year and was assessed the second year, is they're balking at that. And then we heard about an update on the mountain transportation system recommendations. You can go to the Utah Public Notice website and see the PowerPoint presentation from this, but the mountain transportation system recommendations that came out of the staff to the CWC includes the scope, the attributes, the objective, and modes and management, and none of it will be surprising to anybody who's been paying attention to the CWC or to Mountain Accord for the last, I don't know, when did Mountain Accord start, Chris? Was 6 years ago? 8 years ago?
2013.
7 years ago.
Late 2013,
yeah. The temporary dog authorizations that I issued between the dates of March 5th and April 2nd, 2020 include a 10-day permit in Molino and Grizzly Gulch, 7 days to Richard Abelson on Blackjack Road, a 30-day permit to Jeff Selikoff in Powder Ridge, 30-day permit to Paxton Mater in Powder Ridge. Hannah McPherson and Patrick Hogel got a 30-day permit in Sugar Plum, and Brooke McMaster's got a 13-day, which ends today actually, in Albion Basin. The upcoming public meetings that I intend to attend are the CWC Budget Committee meeting on April 6th. That's at 4 p.m. None of these are going to be on in real locations. They're all going to be online, so the CWC website would give you information, as would the Utah Open Meetings website. The UFA Finance Committee meeting that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes is on April 16th at 7:30 in the morning. Salt Lake County hearing for the CDBG and other grants. I forgot to make a note of the date of that. It's at 4 o'clock on, let me just take a look. I think it's the 17th. Yes. Yeah, it's at 4 o'clock on the 17th of April. And then the CWC meets again on May 4th. Okay, any questions about any of that report?
I did have a question. I thought I understood in one of the emergency proclamations that emergency dog licenses were not going to be issued during this time period of the pandemic. I may have misread that. And the second thing was, I just wanted to comment, what I was asking for in terms of the upcoming events was not to ensure that you're busy, Mayor, because I know you are, or to hear all of those, but it was more interested in what events the Alta community might be interested in going to, particularly for Alta, like our upcoming meetings or something like that. I mean, it's okay for you to do what you just did about all the committee meetings and so on that you're going to, but that wasn't my original request.
Okay, so Margaret, can you, can you say the request again? Because I must have misunderstood what you were asking me to do.
Yeah, I think what I was asking for was like the upcoming date of a town council meeting, the upcoming date of a planning commission, the upcoming date of things like that for Alta specifically versus all the things that you're doing to represent the.
Okay, got it. Well, so the next town council meeting will be at 5 p.m. on May 6th. I don't know if there's a planning commission, a need for a planning commission meeting in April or not, but it would be held on the 28th at 3 p.m. John?
And so far, we don't have any business. And talking to the commission members that I've talked to so far, it's like we're just kind of on hold while this is going on. So there's nothing pressing, no business, so they're happy to just stay on hold for a little while. We won't do that forever, but we'll continue holding.
Okay, good. Thank you. And all but I didn't tell you the starting dates of those, Margaret, of those dog licenses, but all but the last one were before that, started before that period, the period of the emergency. The last one, I don't, Jan might want to address it. I can't remember how what was.
We made a decision to stop offering them after that one was issued.
Oh, okay.
Rescind it.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So, let's see. The next item on the agenda, I've lost my second page of my agenda. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the discussion of possible action regarding the resolution for the town of Alta's intent to be annexed into the UFSA boundary. That's resolution 2020 R6 that we discussed during the work session. So the first, I think what we need is we need a motion and a second on this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Cliff and seconded by Elise. Okay, we had a conversation about this. I don't think that Jay was on that conversation. But the one issue that I would like to ask Jay about is to say, if you could you say something about the 3 versus 4 member crew at Station 113? And I'm not asking you about cost. I'm asking you about the operational issues.
So as far as operational issues, the 3 versus 4 staffing configuration, I think we talked a little bit about that at the last council meeting. 3 versus 4 doesn't necessarily change what the crew can do in an emergency situation.
Jay, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Are other people as well? Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
That's better. Yep.
How about now? I'll sit close to the screen.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So there are certain things that that crews can do if you have 4 versus if you have 3. If there's an imminent rescue involved, then a crew of 3 could still affect that rescue. But typically, in any type of fire situation, we follow guidelines that are referred to as the 2 in, 2 out. So if you send 2 people in to do an interior attack on a fire, you want to have 2 people ready to go on the outside of the structure to go in to help them if they were to need assistance or if they needed to switch out at any point. But like I said, if you did have an imminent rescue, then they would still choose to do that based on what the situation was like. Obviously, it's like any other labor situation. You can accomplish more work with 4 people than you can with 3 people. But as far as what they would do initially, they're still going to be able to start work and effect a rescue if possible. And knowing that backup is also coming from the valley. So any type of call, if it's a fire call, if it's an alarm, it may only be 113 that's dispatched initially. But if it is a fire, that initial dispatch will include what is referred to as a first alarm assignment. If it's for a commercial structure, that first alarm assignment is slightly different than if it's just for a residential structure. So all of that is something that comes into play as the crew responds to the fire, and it's something that they're thinking about, what is it we're responding to, and what is our backup that's coming up to help us, and how far away are they? So in the fires we had last winter, all of those things came into play. It was snowy. It was difficult for vehicles to get up the canyon. And that's the same circumstances that happened when we had the Hellgate fire several years ago. It's a little easier to take care of that sort of thing in the summertime when there's not snow on the road, but I guess that's a long answer to your question, but as far as the 3 versus 4, doesn't change significantly what we would do initially if there was a rescue that needed to happen.
Is there a station that has a 3-member crew seasonally and a 4-member crew seasonally in the UFA system that you know of?
No.
Okay, and then the other question that's come up a couple of times is, excuse me, what happens if there's a need to rescue someone in Albion Basin in the wintertime or in West Grizzly or Grizzly Gulch?
So the fire department crews that are at 113, they would work in conjunction. It depends on where the rescue was needed. I mean, we would work closely with WBR and also with Salt Lake County Search and Rescue in order to be able to respond to those incidents. I think it would depend on where the incident was occurring, what the nature of it was, and if it was winter, if it was summer, and the crew that was there to respond. I mean, we don't want to make the situation worse, and so there are times when we would probably not send people into an incident. So nor do we have some of the people that would be equipped or trained to respond in the wintertime to like an avalanche burial or something where you would need to have trained professionals responding to that. So that's when we would work in conjunction with WBR, with the Alta Marshal's office or UPD, depending on where it was, and also Salt Lake County Search and Rescue.
Let me ask Mike Mon a question that's related to that, if you don't mind. So my supposition has been that the Alta ski lifts would do everything it can, especially in its capacity as a first responder, to help the UFA get to, say, an Albion Basin cabin.
Yeah, that'd be correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So I can answer, just from working up there, the Alta Ski Patrol is great with helping us with those sorts of things. If we, and even if there's a skier on the mountain that has a significant medical problem, they've been great helping us get to that skier if possible. Sometimes they're in an area that can be accessed by snowmobile or snowcat, and we're able to get to them in a pretty quick manner and able to help. But that depends on where they're located, at time of day, those sorts of things. You're muted, Mayor.
Yeah, I just realized. Mike, Maury, did it look like you wanted to say something, or?
No, I was just being prepared to say something. I guess I would add, we train for these scenarios with Unified Fire and the Alta Ski Lifts Company. We've got a considerable amount of experience accessing homes that are seasonally not available by the road. And an incident comes to mind, right next to Margaret's house, where we had a carbon monoxide poisoning that involved all residents of the house who were unconscious. And we were able to immediately make use of snowcats, snowmobiles, get our personnel and UFA's personnel to that home really as efficiently as if they could have driven to it with their equipment. So we're aware of that, and we train for it. We prepare for it, and the lift company has always been there to give us that kind of access.
Thank you, Mike, for adding that. Let me just say that when we get to the point of calling this question, what my intention is in either case, I am going to attend I'm just looking at this list of, I'm just looking at my calendar. The UFA Budget Committee meeting on April 16th I will attend that in any case. The budget gets determined by the full UFA board in May. It gets reviewed, and then in June it gets finalized by the full board. If we do pass this resolution, as I said to you in an email, I'll prepare the next draft budget with some UFSA assumptions in there. If we don't pass the resolution, I'm going to have to figure out a way to come up with this large amount. What it looks to me like is that property taxes for our property owners are going to go up in either case. If we join the UFSA, and I haven't seen what the tax rate would be for the subsequent year. I've only seen the contract rate, although it may be that on that document that I shared with you, where is that? The rate may be shown on that document in the material that that's 2021. It doesn't actually show a rate. It just talks about the costs, best I can see. In any case, the 533, it would be the number under current for 1920, 627. But going forward, we know that the number would be higher under the contract, the direct contract. And I think that our property tax would have to raise about $475,000 additional dollars. So the difference between the two in terms of its effect on our property tax is not very large, it seems to me. And as I've expressed to you before, I think there are other advantages of being in the UFSA besides the fact that it's a lower total price. Okay, so any further discussion?
Well, I'm going to vote for the resolution. I think it's the only way forward. I want to ask our council members to come along on this vote and make it unanimous. But at the same time, I want to ask the mayor primarily to become an advocate for the town of Alta to have a 4-member crew in Station 113. And I think that in turn supports the council in showing to our community and our taxpayers that we're advocating for our community. I don't think there's another community in Salt Lake County, or not many in Utah, that has a fire station that is so isolated and vulnerable. It's great to bring other crews, Station 116 or wherever, up the road when the road is open. That's awesome. But I think the reason for a 4-member crew instead of a 3-member crew is a low probability and high risk event. And we've learned a little bit more in the last month or so about those kinds of events. Low probability, high risk. We have to advocate for our community to have a 4-member crew in Station 113.
I'm certainly happy to bring that before. I do believe I have advocated on behalf of the town in general, and I have brought this issue up, and I will be happy to continue to bring this issue up and make this request. If I am on the board of the UFSA, I will be in I think, a better position to request that allocation of resources.
Yes.
And I'll add that I think that the isolation is, I mean, that 52-hour interlodge event, I think, is a pretty compelling example of why Alta needs additional resilience.
I have to share that I have grave concerns about the softness of the numbers, both from UFA's projected cost as well as UFSA's. I'm particularly worried about how, because we have a mechanism to tax residential property owners, that's the route that we're choosing without knowing, in my mind, being able to ask different business entities in town, exactly what will this cost? And what will you be contributing in relation to how much you're using the services that we're attempting to come up with this enormous increase in bill. So I have to share those concerns in speaking to how that will influence my vote.
I'm not sure I understood exactly, Sheridan, but it didn't sound like anything that any of the people on this in this meeting can do at the moment will address those concerns, or did I misunderstand?
No, I mean, I think it's quite difficult based on the data that's been provided so far, and I appreciate everyone's hard work, including yours, Mayor, as well as Margaret, your work with Jay. But it sounds like there's anywhere from 60 to 80% of the calls being driven by Alta ski lift clientele, which could well be lodge clientele that happened to be on the hill that day. It could be residents that happen to be getting injured on the hill that day. But when I hear that wide variance in figures, when I hear, when I'm not able to find out, so what would the taxable contribution be then if we do increase it for everyone? And then be able to run the numbers in my head about, okay, so of course, taxes would go up for the ski lift company as well as for the lodges. I'd love to see what those figures will be in order to make an informed decision about, is this in any way equitable based on the actual usage? And without that information, I feel pressured to make a decision based on budgetary deadlines And it concerns me greatly when it's such a large amount of money and the answer has to be now. My general rule of thumb when it comes to that financially is if the answer has to be now, the answer has to be no.
Well,
And I haven't
what,
been reassured.
what I don't understand exactly is, I mean, the tax rate will be the same for every property taxpayer.
Sure.
And the property taxes are a matter of public record. And so
It's quite difficult to find out what that is, though, based on the different ways that different properties are taxed, particularly with the ski lift company, in coming up with, okay, so what will this do to the total taxation? And to be able to look at what that new figure might be in relation to the actual usage. And the actual usage itself is a very soft number, anywhere from 60 to 80% or more based on a lot of outliers. So that makes it very,
using the tax basis, the tax is the basis for the payment, makes usage not matter anymore.
I understand.
Because nobody's being charged based on how much they use the service.
Sure, but I feel like there's a basic inequity there that needs to be addressed. I'd feel better looking at the justice of that inequity if I knew what the figures were about what people were going to pay should we choose to raise the funds in this way, through a millage, through...
Isn't the assessed value of properties public information in Utah? And so you've had several months where you could have calculated those numbers yourself if you'd wanted to. What we do have is the total is $300 million, and that's getting multiplied. That's where the 533 is coming from. So this is background work, I think, that any town council member, any member of the public could have done.
Do you know?
Well, I haven't been interested in this question. So no, I don't know that. I know my own condo, and we gave some, Chris Cawley gave a number of examples of lodges and single family houses and condos, and we talked about what those examples ought to be. And so I don't think they were unrepresentative examples. They were kind of average scenarios, as I recall, Chris. But so that gives you some baseline assumptions about the average property. But it's true, we don't know. I don't know what the ski area's tax bill is, but for some reason, Mike, I remember a number of $50,000 is the amount that your taxes are going to go up. But I don't remember where that number came into my head. But I haven't really been concerned about this, Sheridan. And if you had asked me to look into this, I'm not sure I would have. I think my answer would have been, the information's public, go for it, because I got a lot on my plate.
I'm just thinking about how to be able to answer to our constituents, particularly individual residential property owners. How is this just based on our very limited usage and this very high potential tax increase for us?
We are my answer to that is we're going to pay the same thing as everybody else. That's my answer to when I've been asked that question. Now, I know people don't like it that their taxes are going up. And the other thing that I say to them is what I said in a letter that I shared with the public, or a letter to the public, was rather than frame this as a huge loss, I've been framing as a huge taking on of a burden. The way I'm thinking about this is this very generous benefit is going away. That is that we were paying a lot less than our neighbors. Now, I don't know, that doesn't seem to be helping you or some of our taxpayers, and I can appreciate it. I spent an hour and 20 minutes on the phone with one of our taxpayers who says his taxes are going to go up, by a couple $1,000s, and like, yes, but they've been low for a couple thousand, lower than they would have been for years by that amount. So I don't know what else to say in terms of the fairness question. Partly it's a matter of fairness, and partly I would say to you, what do you propose? What's the alternative? And I don't think there is a good alternative, a better alternative. This sucks in a lot of ways. I think you can argue that it's unfair. I've tried to argue that it's less unfair than some people seem to think, but I'm not arguing that this is a good outcome. It is just the best of the available ones, it seems to me.
Well, in terms of fairness, when you talk about fire protection, it's not the same as a utility where I use 10 gallons of water and you use 100 gallons of water. You should pay 10 times more. This is public safety. We're all in this together. This is the protection of our community.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I own a rental property down in Sandy, and I pay for fire and police protection for that property. Have I had to use it since I've owned that home? No, I hope I don't have to, but it's there and it's part of being a homeowner. And like Harris said, I think in some ways we need to try to be fair to our neighboring communities. They've been doing this way, and we've gotten a special deal, which has been nice. And unfortunately, the deal's going away, and we are being presented with two ways to pay this bill. We can either join the UFSA and make this a 15% property increase for everyone at Alta, including the ski area, including the lodges. And that seems to be the best way to make it across the board. Or we could try to get it as a contracted rate with the town. But even if we increase sales tax and increase our property tax to the max that we can, we're still going to be short and have to cut other things in our budget. And I can't think of anything that we can cut right now. I mean, I've been on the budget committee for a couple of years now, and I can't think of any way we can come up with this money, especially with this upcoming year that we're going to have. If we have 25% less in sales tax revenue, I mean, this bill is going to change year to year. It's going to be based off of this new percentage of use, and I don't know how we could plan for that as a community. And this joining the UFSA just makes it so everyone pays the 15% increase across the board.
You know, I think that if our sales tax went down by 25%, my estimate of 475, it could end up being more expensive for our property tax owners than joining the UFSA could be. Speaking to the question that Cliff brought up about lack of opposition, if not actual enthusiastic support of moving into the UFSA, I can tell you that the more we express that this is what we want to do, the more likely, and I know this is going to sound vague, the more likely I am to be able to get a slow entrance, so to speak, a little bit of a grace period. Because I can go to the UFSA board and say, we want to join, but here's where we want your help. I think that they're less likely to be helpful if they think that we're going to end up having town council members rallying our taxpayers to oppose this move.
I don't know about rallying taxpayers. I obviously have a conflict of interest here, as others of us do as a property tax payer within the town. But it's not that I'm looking to rally people to oppose this as much as I wanted additional information. I came up with a suggestion of an alternative today. It was something that Polly said she could investigate. And so to go forward with the resolution as it's currently worded and not allow us the opportunity to pursue a different alternative or different approach at the same time, or slowing down the need or seeking additional time to be able to do this, is not to me the same as saying I'm going to rally property owners in town to oppose a position that the town council is supporting. It seems to me more the idea of getting the information necessary so that we are as fully informed as we can be.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you would, it sounds like you would support a decision that the town council makes. Mike Maury, you wanted to jump in?
Hi, thanks, Mayor. I don't know how well received this will be. In particular, you all know that I'm not very fond of saying nice things about firemen. But I do, as a public safety person, I do want to urge the council to be a little cautious about basing decisions on who uses us the most. As an example, I can tell you that yesterday we had a very dramatic pediatric emergency in Alta that originated from a business that I know doesn't call us very often for police or fire services. The response that was given by UFA was phenomenal. I have no doubt in my mind that the direct result was that a life was preserved. And it's a difficult decision. I think along with who uses ours and the fire department services the most, we really have to look at ensuring that we're providing the highest quality service to everybody, regardless of how often they use it. And that's your job to do it at the best financial option available. But I just have to say we need to be really careful about the numbers game of where's UFA going more frequently. More importantly, are they providing us with the service we need? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I'd like to move us along because we're now at 7 o'clock and we're a little bit behind our schedule now. So is this a reasonable time to call the question?
Mayor, you and I also had a discussion during the work session about requesting documents documents that I received from Jay be attached to our record in some way.
Yeah, indeed. So without objection, we can do that. I am going to vote in favor of the motion, but I will also say that I am a property owner and a taxpayer in Alta, so I also have a conflict of interest, except that I'm actually going to pay more. So I don't know exactly how that plays out, but I'll say that I have that situation. Okay, so we're voting on, let me just pull up the title of the document, make sure I get it just right. We are approving, Polly, you can weigh in here. We are approving on our side a joint resolution of the Unified Fire Service Area, and they'll have their own resolution number, and of the town of Alta, which is resolution number 2020 R6, declaring an intent to adjust the boundary of the Unified Fire Service Area to include the town of Alta.
That's correct. And if you want to know, well, why don't you go ahead about this and then I can talk about timing if it's appropriate.
Maybe we can even just prepare a brief about the options there for the council members at some point. I don't know, it's just getting a little bit late. Okay, all those in favor of adopting resolution 2020 R6, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, the resolution passes 3-2. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a short presentation from the Wasatch Front Regional Council regarding transportation planning projects. Is that, I know we have our visitors with us, is that still something we should do, Chris?
Alex just unmuted. Christie's there as well. We don't intend to take 15 minutes. I think we asked for 5 on the agenda and you guys were feeling generous. So I think I'll just turn it over to Alex for now and fill in the blanks.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, I'll
Very
start my
clear.
video too. Oh,
Very
good.
clear. Oh, hey.
Hi, all. So I think we can do this in under 5 minutes. I know you've been there for a while. So you might remember that we came to you a few months ago and we're working with Chris on kind of a way to prioritize some of the transportation and other projects that I'm trying to share my screen. So one second.
Is he, Jan, is he going to be able to share his screen?
I don't think I can.
Harris has been as a non-host.
Oh, I can share my screen. I seem to have the option. So,
okay.
But I don't know if Alex also has that option or not.
He should.
I see a green bar on the right side of his screen.
Yeah, as far as I know, all participants can share screens at this moment.
It might just be because I'm going off my browser, but I can just be brief. So Chris put together, along with me, a document kind of highlighting a few of the most frequent projects we saw that came up in the previous planning processes. So it kind of outlines both, you know, high level, like what it is, what the benefits are, what some of the potential considerations would be, and the potential next steps. Along with that, we shared a very brief survey that's already been taken by Council Member Morgan. So it's just kind of asking to rank the 9 projects that we came up with. So just 1 through 9, and then this is just basically to give us a better idea what kind of the group thought is related to these various projects. And then we'll go back and we'll kind of relook at those and then come to you with kind of like a discussion period, kind of, and get a little more information, but present a little bit more, and then we'll have your rankings too. So that'll help us just move forward. And our ultimate goal is to kind of, you know, pick 4 to 5 projects and move them forward either through more public outreach, design considerations, or, you know, early concept development. So that's kind of the ask for you guys. I know it's kind of a crazy time and we hope to be there, but we think this, you know, if you could take a look at that, my email's on the handout that Chris provided. So yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, where is the survey?
So do you have the, it's called Alta Concepts Handout PDF? I think it went out.
I can show this if you just give me a second.
Sure.
I have transportation concepts or
Yeah. Alta Transportation Concepts handout. Yeah. It's on the first page.
Okay, the Survey Monkey.
Is this the document we're talking about?
That is.
Yep. So
okay,
that Survey Monkey,
yeah, here's the.
you can just click on it.
And be careful not to hit done or complete on that Survey Monkey page, because it will record whatever you've done to the options so far. I found that out. So.
Do you need me to scroll through this in any to other pages, Alex?
If you just could go to the second page, Mayor, that'd be great. So this is kind of, I just wanted, just for high level, this is what each of the 9 projects will have, a brief description, some of the benefits, considerations, where some of the source material that we're bringing this to you was from. So in this one, the EIS, and then the Active Transportation Implementation Project. Kind of, this one is a little extra that has a status. And then, you know, if this was chosen as one of the top 4 to 5 projects, what some of the next steps would be. We don't intend this to be like, if there's a voting order, that would be the end of it. We'd want to come back to you and kind of, you know, get your official buy-off on these are the 4 to 5 projects that will be looked at further. I want to say that the ones that aren't the highest scoring, they're not bad projects. It's just at this time, we can only really focus on so much. And part of this project talking with Chris and others is like, we want it to be a manageable bite rather than kind of a pie in the sky. And how do we start, really understanding what some of the various potential projects in the area could be?
Yeah, one thing I would just point out, I think I think what Alex just said about coming back to the town council with the data rather than making an automatic decision is a good idea, because what would be being selected is a assemblage of projects, and by asking them to be ranked or assessed individually, you may not have a set that makes as much sense or is affordable or don't compete in terms of construction scheduling, for example. It's a little bit more, let me make an analogy. It's like you have applicants to the university and we go through those applications, but what we're doing is assembling a class and not just admitting individuals.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, is that, we want to kind of have a complete look at various different things. And so, yeah, this is just kind of a initial step to continue the progress on this project. I know a lot of us have different things on our minds, but just to keep the ball slowly moving, and then to come back with you either next month or the following month and kind of give you the results of this survey. So, yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
And I would just add, I just want to add, I would encourage you to reach out to me and Alex and Christy with questions and comments on any of the material. I think it would be great to get your responses to the survey by May 1st, so that we might be able to talk to you again at the May council meeting, which is like a week and a half after May 1st. I'll acknowledge that there are a lot of constraints associated with each of these that are going to be more important to some stakeholders than others. I would encourage you to think about what you think as a Town of Alta council member should be our priority to pursue. We will take the results of your survey. It's a very brief survey, like Alex described. Present those results to you, and then the next step is going to involve talking to the stakeholders who are going to have some influence over whether these are feasible or not. So we'll get to, if your first reaction to one of these projects or the other is that Alta Ski Area or UDOT or some other stakeholder with influence is going to not want this to happen, disregard that for the time being. Tell us what you like, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Any questions for Chris or Alex or Christy? I'll just say to Alex and Christy, you were patient. You were here for a long time, and you got to see the wheels of government working and grinding fine, as my grandmother used to say.
It was an interesting discussion.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is resolution 2020 R7, amending a resolution that we passed 2020 R4, having to do with the number of dog licenses. We're not actually trying to change anything that we intended. We just didn't implement our intention as accurately as we wanted to. Jen, do you want to give an overview of what is going on, please?
Sure. I think you summed it up pretty well. But I guess I can add that we had some incorrect math at the council meeting when we adopted this. And so the one thing that has changed in this resolution from what we previously had was the number of licenses in Class A. And so that is in this resolution 31, in Class B 43, in Class C 11, in Class D 10. So it does not change the total number of dog licenses, which is 95, which represents 25% of the last census population. So just trying to stay true to that.
And we continue to move all of the available licenses into Class A, is that correct?
That is, yes, that's what we did.
Right, which is what we had intended to do. It's just that we didn't get the number precisely accurate in the last effort. And
Right, we basically double counted the 2 that were unfulfilled in the A when we added the additional ones, so.
Okay. And so we need to do this today because we have a drawing coming up potentially.
Correct. And I have updated the Town of Alta website. It's got the drawing on it. I have sent out that information to everybody that has requested it previously. I have already been receiving submissions.
Okay. And we'll hold the drawing in this kind of format, not in person.
Correct. That is
Assuming that COVID-19 is not defeated by early May.
I would expect at noon on May 1st that we're still going to be in this situation, and this will be how I will administer it.
Yeah, that's what I would figure too. Okay, sorry, I should have asked for a motion before all of that conversation. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2020 R7, authorizing the maximum number of Alta dog licenses to be assigned, setting license fees, and authorizing a drawing for the new and forfeited Town of Alta Class A, B, or C dog licenses to be conducted if necessary?
So moved.
Second.
I don't know who was that. Sheridan who made the motion?
Think so.
And then seconded by Elise. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous, so there are none opposed. Okay, very good. New business. I actually had something on my mind, but now I don't recall what it is. But does anybody else? One thing I will, I'll just reiterate my thanks to the staff for the really hard work that they're doing. I can tell you that I know how hard they're working because I see it, and I really appreciate it. Just want to say that again. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. Good. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for putting up with the format. I think this actually went pretty well. No Zoom bombers. And thank you for that, Jen.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
And I will work on having the meeting in its entirety posted for anybody that wants a recap.
Okay, good. And it has been recorded and it has been streamed on YouTube. So I think we were successful. So, all
I'm
right.
going to watch it again right now.
I'm sure.
Until tomorrow, John.
I'm sure Alex and
Darn it.
Christy can't wait for the next installment of our show. Okay. Good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Good night.